You and your partner want to raise your child to be bilingual, but you don't speak each other's language. Is that a deal breaker? My husband doesn't speak Chinese and my Russian isn't much better. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what you can do to raise bilingual or even multilingual kids, despite the fact that you and your partner speak different languages. Let's go! For those of you new to my channel, welcome! My name is Kayi and this channel is all about empowering parents to raise their kids to be fluent in more than one language. We live in the UK as a family and are raising our children to be trilingual in Russian, Mandarin and English. So one of the most common things I hear from parents who want to raise bilingual kids is this. I'd love to raise my kids to be bilingual, but my partner doesn't speak my language. Is this still possible? Is this still worth trying? And most importantly, how can we make it work? These are the questions I'll try my best to answer in this video. First of all, let me say this. It is absolutely possible to raise bilingual or even trilingual or multilingual children despite the fact that you and your partner don't speak the same language other than a majority language, which means the language used by the majority of people in the country or region where you live. I know that it's entirely possible, not least because my husband and I are living proof that you can. So my goal is to share with you practical tactics you can use, drawing on our personal experience as well as research. I'll also help you get into the right mindset to make this work for you. Make sure you watch till the end as I'll tell you about 2 free resources that I've created for families just like yours. Now let's dive in. So let's address the first question. Is it possible to raise bilingual kids in a mixed marriage or relationship when you and your partner don't speak each other's language and only share the majority language? Well, many people seem to think it's not possible. Recently, I overheard a conversation between 2 mums at my kids' school. One of them is from an African country and her husband is English. I heard this mum tell the other mum, "Yeah, it's a pity my children only speak English. You know, my husband doesn't speak my language. It's really hard to raise our kids to be bilingual." I was so tempted to go over to her and tell her this. Hey, there is hope. Give one parent, one language a chance. What is one parent, one language, you might ask? Let me explain. Basically, one parent, one language, or OPOL or OPOL, is an approach that has been proven to be effective for countless families where one parent doesn't speak the other's language. The idea is that each parent sticks to their own native language when speaking to the child, allowing the child to naturally associate each parent with a different language. And yes, it might seem strange at first, especially if you are the only one using a language your partner doesn't understand. But trust me, it can work and has worked for so many families around the world. So let's take this African mum from my school as an example. I mean my kids' school. She's married to an English guy and are raising their children in England, where we live. For this family, OPOL could look something like this. Mum speaks to the children exclusively in her native language, let's say Swahili, while dad speaks to the kids exclusively in English. The children will also use English in everyday life, at school, etc. When the family is together, they can speak English, so the family can have a normal conversation together. Researchers have found that this approach reduces the confusion children might otherwise feel when multiple languages are mixed, helping them associate each language with a particular person. In fact, a study published in Applied Psycholinguistics found that children exposed to OPOL at home can develop strong bilingual skills, provided that the quality and quantity of input in each target language is adequate. Alright, that all sounds well and good, but you might be wondering, does OPOL work in real life? Well, it's worked for us. OPOL is essentially what we've been practicing as a family since our first child was born in 2016. You see, my husband is Russian and I'm Chinese. I speak to the children exclusively in Chinese, Mandarin, while my husband speaks to them exclusively in Russian. When all of us are together, we mostly speak English so we can have a normal conversation as a family. Even when we're out and about, we try to stick to OPOL as much as possible to maintain consistency. Yes, sometimes this actually provokes curious reactions from others. I still remember a few years ago when we were on holiday in Turkey, a young English couple staying at the same hotel as us, who were from a small English town, just couldn't quite understand how my husband and I could speak different languages to our kids. And that was normal for us. They were like totally confused. Okay, so now that's how we practice OPOL. And guess what? My husband does not speak Chinese. Okay, he might have picked up 10 words or so over the years, but basically he doesn't understand or speak it. And my Russian is a bit better, maybe. I can talk like a 5-year-old Russian kid, but we've been using OPOL for the last 8 years with our own children. And it's been amazing to see how naturally they've picked up both languages. It's not always perfect, and OPOL does have some downsides, which I'll go into in greater detail later. And OPOL definitely takes consistent effort to make it work. But on the whole, it's a well-proven strategy for families who want to raise bilingual or trilingual children, especially in mixed relationships where the parents speak different languages. So the fact that you and your partner don't speak each other's language is not a deal breaker. Far from it. Give OPOL a try. It's worked for literally countless families who are raising multilingual kids around the world. So there's no reason why it shouldn't work for you too. Okay, so now we know that OPOL can work wonders in this kind of situation, but you might still have some lingering doubts in your mind. Won't it feel weird for me and my partner to speak different languages to our children? Or you might be thinking that, I don't really like the idea that I can't understand what my partner and kids are talking about. I don't want any secret language in my home. Yep, but these are all legitimate concerns. In fact, these were my concerns too before we even became parents. While we were expecting our first child more than 8 years ago, back in 2016, we already knew that we wanted to raise him to be trilingual. Although we didn't know about one parent, one language OPOL back then, I kind of instinctively felt that I wanted to learn Russian so I could understand future conversations between my husband and our child. I started doing some DIY learning with language learning textbooks, and I also began taking one-to-one online lessons with a Russian teacher through italki, a platform I highly recommend. By the way, this is not sponsored, okay? italki, if you're watching this, I'm here for any sponsorship deals. Honestly, the language learning process was rewarding in itself. So here's my next tip for parents who are in a mixed marriage and want to raise bilingual kids. Why not make an effort to learn your partner's language or have your partner learn your language, or both? But I want to stress that this step is more optional than essential. OPOL will still work even if you don't speak each other's language, but learning each other's language will make the whole journey and process much more enjoyable and less stressful. Why? Because it will remove some of the tensions that OPOL can cause. You'll hopefully at least understand some basic conversations so that when your partner speaks to your children in their language, you won't feel completely left out or suspicious or resentful. I know it sounds pretty crazy, but trust me, these feelings can and do exist in mixed language households. Learning each other's language will go a long way towards improving harmony in such households. In our family, for example, even though my Russian isn't very good, I can understand maybe 80% of what my children and husband say to each other, which means I don't feel FOMO. A second benefit is this: by learning each other's language, you'll also be setting a great example for your children, showing that you yourself are open to learning a new language and you're not just making your child do it. In my last video, I talked about the benefits of being bilingual and how anyone can harness these benefits by learning a new language. And I dived into some practical ways that anyone can start learning a new language, regardless of their age and current ability. Check it out if you're interested. But basically, you can take action right now. You don't have to spend lots of money or time to do this. If you're old school, a bit like me, go to your local library and pick up a language learning book for your partner's language. Start working your way through it, spending 10 minutes a day. Or if you're more tech savvy, try a language app. Duolingo is pretty good. In fact, I have a plan for a new video series where I try to learn Italian using Duolingo before we go on holiday to Sicily next year. I'll be sure to document my progress on this channel, so make sure to subscribe. You can also try italki and practice with a native speaker online. It's low cost compared to face-to-face lessons in real life. When I was learning Russian 8 years ago, each lesson with my amazing teacher from Azerbaijan only cost $5 per hour. It was really worth it. Even my husband, who claims to have no talent for languages, is slowly picking up some Chinese phrases here and there. And although he's not fluent enough to have a conversation with us in Chinese, it's really nice when he sometimes, chimes in and says something like, "Oh, 你们饿了. You guys are hungry." Yeah, my kids say that about 200 times a day. So I'm glad that he's picked up that phrase. My kids love it when my husband speaks Chinese, and especially when he messes it up, so to speak. It's real fun. So try it. Learn your partner's language and show your kids that language learning is fun and worthwhile. Now let's tackle the next question. What if one language in your household is getting far less exposure than the other language? How can you address that imbalance? Let's return to the family I referred to at the beginning of this video for a minute. So the mum's from an African country while the dad's English and only speaks English. Let's say they adopt the OPOL, OPOL method, so that the mum always uses, let's say, Swahili with her kids. Both mum and dad work full-time, so even if the mum speaks to the kids in Swahili consistently, the children may only get 3 or 4 hours of exposure to Swahili maximum during a school day, which is still amazing, but obviously this exposure is far less than what they would get with English, which is more like 10 hours a day. And if you're a trilingual family like us, with the two parents speaking to the child in 2 minority languages, the kids' exposure to each of these 2 languages would be further diluted. That's the best way to get around that. That's why I always stress the importance of bolstering the minority language or languages. Parents often worry that their children will fall behind at school or socially if they don't push the majority language. But in my experience, that's never the case. In 99.99% of cases, it's the minority language that's at risk. So that's the language you want to focus on, especially if you and your partner speak different languages, because in that scenario, only one of you will be speaking to your child in that language. So what does it mean to bolster the minority language in practical terms? In my opinion, it boils down to 2 crucial factors. First, consistency. Be really consistent in using the target language with your child and avoid the majority language as much as possible, even though I know it's really hard. Secondly, you need to find ways to create as much immersion in the target language as possible. This means introducing media like books, songs, music, and even TV shows in that language to make it feel more like an actual part of your child's day. As I point out in my book Bilingual and Trilingual Parenting 101, link down below if you want to check it out. Even if you do nothing else, read to your child in the target language for 10 minutes a day. Maybe as part of a comforting bedtime routine. It will go a long way in building good habits and creating positive associations in your child's mind with the target language. Another way to bolster the minority language is to bring in other speakers of the minority language, like family members, friends, or even community groups, so that your child gets to use that language actively outside of the home. Even small steps like, phone calls or video chats with relatives can help reinforce the language. For example, last weekend, we had an incredible language bonanza where the children genuinely got to use Russian and Chinese outside of their immediate family. On Friday, we went to our Russian friend's house to see their new baby, and the kids got to speak Russian to the parents and their children. On Saturday, we met up with 3 other Chinese families, and the kids got to use their Chinese with the grown-ups as well as the kids while eating cake and just playing. It was so amazing to see. Such outings can really go a long way in motivating children to use the target languages, as they can see for themselves how people other than mommy and daddy actually use these languages in real life. Obviously, nothing beats a trip to the country where the target language is the majority language, right? So if that's feasible, go ahead and book that trip. Now, moving on to the next point. You must set the right expectations and boundaries, okay? What do I mean by that? Let me explain. Just the other day, the kids and I, we were just chatting about some stuff after dinner. I can't remember what it was now, but anyways, my husband was within earshot, but he was doing his own thing, fixing some broken item in the kitchen or something like that. Somehow, in our conversation, my kids and I mentioned the word baba, which means dad in Chinese. It was something totally neutral, but when my husband heard the word baba, it's like his ears pricked up and he went like, oh, what has Papa done now? He kind of assumed that we were saying something bad about him. Well, welcome to the dark side of OPOL, OPOL. And this incident is an example of why learning your partner's language can be so beneficial. So that's why when you're raising bilingual or multilingual kids in a mixed household, it's so important to set some ground rules to maintain respect and trust. What does that mean in practical terms? You can set rules like, we promise not to speak negatively about each other in front of the kids, no matter what language is in. We won't take advantage of our secret language with the children to say bad things about each other, however tempting it can be sometimes. Confession, I have done this in the past. Share in the comments below if you grew up with a secret language. And what about those moments when you don't understand what your partner is saying to the children? It's so easy to feel left out or defensive, isn't it? But here's the thing, getting upset doesn't help anyone. Instead, let's set some boundaries and expectations right from the start. For example, you can agree with your partner that it's okay to ask for a summary, or for everyone to switch to a common language like English, for instance. Little things like that can make a big difference in the long run. Essentially, the goal is to create an environment where both languages feel safe and valued, not a source of tension and conflict. Sure, things won't always be perfect, things will be chaotic at times. Spend an evening with our family and you'll see what I mean. But it's important to at least agree on the principle that you and your partner will strive to be respectful and also trustful. How do you make this work? Have an open conversation with your partner about what's acceptable and what's not. Be respectful. Show empathy. And when your kids see that you both support and respect each other's languages, they learn that multilingualism is something that can bring people together, not something that causes conflict. And now let's get to what might be the most important point of all. What if you feel like you are not doing enough or not doing it right? You just feel like you and your partner will never raise perfectly bilingual kids because of the language barrier between you, among other factors. Well, if there's anything I've learned 8 years into our trilingual journey, it is this. Perfection doesn't exist. If the desire for perfection is holding you back, please take it from me. With your nurturing and encouragement, your child can become fluent in the target language and find joy and fulfillment in the process. That's more important than any elusive notion of perfection that you may have right now. But if you don't start or if you give up, all that will be lost. I talked about this in a previous video on the 3 mindset shifts that transformed my journey, but it's worth saying again, striving for perfection is one of the biggest traps we can fall into. Why? Because it makes us feel like if we're not doing everything perfectly, we are failing. But that's just not true. There's no such thing as failing, just as there's no such thing as perfection. Everything exists on a continuum. Binary concepts like failure and success and perfection just aren't very helpful, are they? Look, my husband and I have been doing OPOL for 8 years, and trust me, we are far from perfect. We mix languages. We get frustrated when our kids reply to us in English. We can get annoyed when we feel like the other person's excluding us by using their language. But here's the thing, right? Those moments don't erase the progress we are making. What matters most is that your kids are making progress day after day, month after month, even year after year. Sure, they may not sound like a native speaker. Our kids certainly don't, but that doesn't mean your efforts are worthless. If your child is learning and enjoying the process, your efforts are already paying off. They really are. So, in short, I encourage you to remind yourself that the goal isn't perfection. It's about showing up, doing your best, making progress together with your child, and nurturing their potential to the best of your ability. So honestly, give yourself permission to let go of that impossible standard. Your kids will grow up appreciating not just the languages themselves, but the love and effort that came with them. Now, are you ready to put everything into action? At the beginning of this video, I promised you that I would share with you 2 free resources that I've created for families looking to raise multilingual children. I've got a family language planner which will help you create a custom-made plan for your family's unique circumstances. What's more, I've also created a 48-page starter guide for families who want to begin their multilingual journey. Don't have the time to read a full-length book just yet, like the Bilingual and Trilingual Parenting 101 book that I've written. Check out the links for both resources in the description box below. You can download them absolutely for free. Want to find out more about the 3 mindset shifts that have transformed our multilingual parenting journey? Watch the video right now.